Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm talking about Lords of the Fallen. My name is Johnny. I've played every Souls game from Software, and today I'm sharing with you my thoughts about Lords of the Fallen after completing it and playing a little bit in New Game Plus. And this is not going to be scripted, so I'll have different links for these sections. I'm covering gameplay, presentation, some of the technical issues that I had with the game, and then to wrap it up, fun factor. So without further ado, let's jump into the gameplay. The first thing that I wanted to cover here was some improvements to the typical systems that we see in Souls games, like the stance change. And by this I mean two-handing your weapon or single-handed. And it's so quick to switch between them that you can actually do it mid-combo. And my cat's about to attack my sound panels there. It's so convenient to switch between stances. You know, let's say you're doing a big two-handed swing, but you want to switch to single-handed for a more poke style move that's in that move set. You can do it fluently in your combo. It's amazing. You know, it used to be kind of clunky to switch between two-handed, one-handed, and now it's really easy to do. So I really appreciate that. I think the ability to integrate those move sets in the same combo is awesome, especially because the move sets are made in such a way that particular moves will be great for, you know, a file type attack or a crowd where a swipe will do really well, or maybe a vertical, you know, all this type of stuff. So you have access to a lot of different moves, whereas normally you would be stuck with the move set of the two-handed, for example. So the other thing they've improved upon is the ranged system, where sure you still have casting and throwables, which you know those existed in prior games, of course, but it's a much more streamlined system where you have the same bar, whether you're casting stuff or you're throwing, you have the same bar that's automatically switching based on what that is to represent either the ammo you have available or the mana in case of casting stuff. And crucially, the amount of throwables or the ammo refills when you rest as well. So that's an amazing change straight away. You don't have to worry about, you know, consumable items to throw. And they're very powerful in the game as well. We'll get to that. But it's very cool to be able to visualize that. And not only that, but to weave in ranged attacks from throwables in between your combos. So, you know, you might be able to dish out two attacks and then quickly throw out a hammer or you know, a javelin or something. And it actually does a lot of damage. And it's really easy to do too in your combo, just because of how the layout and everything works. It's really seamless to switch between melee and ranged, which is awesome, really. In the case of miracles and spells, you still have the cast time, so you have to worry about that. Do you have time to cast your spell before you get hit and interrupted, right? Now talking a bit about the two worlds. So, you know, we've all made a big deal out of the two worlds, but really how much of that actually comes into play when you play the game? Well, quite a bit actually, and I have to say they've been very clever about how they've done it. The best way I can describe it, if you haven't played the game, is that there is the normal world, and then the dead world, the umbral world, is basically an overlapped version of that. So it takes the base world and it overlaps extra elements on top of it. So most times you will either have a platform that doesn't exist in the normal world, or maybe a gate will actually be opened in the umbral. So that's the type of stuff you will find. And you will also find extra enemies in umbral. Not only that, but when you're in umbral, you have a dread meter that goes up. And when it gets all the way to the top, a red reaper, very scary enemy, will come hunt you down, right? And you cannot heal when you're in the red dread area. So have to be very careful with that. And even before that, there will be these goons that spawn to come get you. They're very weak enemies, but they add up if you don't take care of them. And more than anything, you just can't really relax while you're in Umbral. That's sort of the feeling it gives you. There's also a soundscape that changes completely when you're in Umbral, giving you a bit of a like a evil vibe, or a danger sort of vibe to it. So I definitely think the Umbral gives an awesome duality to the world, which we'll talk about in the presentation part. But yeah, there are other things like umbral testicles, and this is what I call them, but they're little orbs that only can be visible in the umbral world, and they often buff enemies, maybe augmenting their attacks or making them invulnerable in some cases. So then in those times, the only way to get rid of the enemy is to first get rid of the eye, which you can do with the lantern, or if you're in umbral, you can actually hit the eye and kill it first. So that's another element of something that only exists in the umbral that you have to interact with and be aware of. The other thing is you have these seedlings that are consumable items that you can use to create checkpoints. So the bonfires are called vestiges, and you can create a temporary vestige, which you can only have one at a time and gets replaced when you use a new seedling. And there are many areas in the umbral world where you will find a flower bed, and that's where you can create a checkpoint. So you have a multitude of these to almost like craft what checkpoint is useful for you. If you're reattempting a boss, there might be a flower bed really close to it that you can use, so you don't have to make such a long run to the boss itself. Or maybe it's just an area you're farming, going back and forth in it, and you want a checkpoint right there in the middle. So it's super useful. I love that system. The idea of a temporary or bespoke checkpoint is awesome. I want to see more in games. Another element that really changed my gameplay is the umbral eyes that you can socket in your gear and give you different modifiers, right? And some of them are incredibly powerful. For example, there's one towards the end of the game where you get unlimited ammo. It just costs you some withered health. And ranged is incredibly OP in this game, especially towards the end of the game when you get access to some powerful weapons and stuff. And so it really, the game can become a joke if you start abusing ranged weapons towards the end. But it's awesome. It's there. You can use it. It's powerful. It's cool. It's fun. And another eye that I used a lot was the Hyper Armor eye. It's one that, when equipped, allows you to fully charge a heavy attack without being interrupted. Now, what happens is if you get hit during the charge, you will get some withered health, but you can recover that health back when you hit the enemy. And because it's a charged attack, it does a lot of damage. You get all of that health back. Now, it's not as simple as it sounds because there's a timing to it. And if you get hit right outside of the timing window, then you will lose that recoverable health instead. So it's also dangerous. You kind of have to wield this responsibly. But it's a really cool mechanic in the sense that you can actually kind of disjoint an enemy attack by going into a charge yourself. And if you get the timings right, it feels really satisfying to just unga bunga through an enemy attack like that. It's really cool. And again, changes the way you play the game in a significant way. And there are some others like that, but those were the two most notable ones that I found. Last up in this section, I want to talk about navigation, platforming. That has been a bit more of a mixed bag for me. As much as the exploration has been awesome, and I love the duality of the worlds, and getting lost was fun, actually. Exploring, understanding how the areas are connected was really cool. I have to say, I got lost a lot, and that's not uncommon for me in games. People who watch me play know I do struggle with navigation, so I admit my part of the blame there in the equation, but I do think there's a lack of guidance in the game that occurs at multiple points where you're unsure as where to go in general, not even just within the area itself. But then within the areas, there have been problems of just understanding how to progress through it and what's the clear way forward. So there were some frustrations in that area, and the platforming is really rough. I don't know any other way to describe it. The jumping system is typical to that of older Souls, where you have to hold down the sprint and then jump. And oftentimes the jump doesn't happen exactly when you expected it, and you think you landed on the platform correctly, but actually the game kind of visually glitches and doesn't land you fully, and then you fall down. You have to come back. It just never feels good. I don't know. I really think it could have been done better. Maybe a dedicated jump button or whatever. Maybe it didn't feel great, and just anytime there was platforming to do or fighting around the platforms, it felt really sucky. So with that, let's get into presentation. Okay, so first of all, I mean, the world detail is amazing, right? This is Unreal 5, and you can really tell the engine has so much detail packed, and they're taking advantage of it in a great way. There's a lot of fire, there's some ice, a lot of particle effects going on, and the bosses also have some really cool effects on them. So they take great advantage of it, to the point where it's actually a difficult game to stream because, just given the nature of streaming and the limitations of encoding, you can't really present that much detail, and the encoding really struggles to pack all that in. And actually, the game doesn't look that good on stream compared to what I'm seeing when I'm playing it. So it's kind of hard to convey, but it looks beautiful. It's an awesome world. They really nailed the art design. I don't know who they got for this, but there's so much in the world that's kind of doing silent world building, if you will, right? Just kind of describing how things are constructed, and there's a great deal of cosmic horror as well in the background, and especially some of the side stuff or optional content. You see some stuff that creeped me out. Absolutely, was awesome. You actually also have some jump scares in a game, which is a first for a Souls game, right? Not a lot of jump scares in these games, but I actually thought they were pretty well executed. When I talked about the duality of the worlds, I wasn't kidding. They really do add a different layer. For example, one area, it's rainy and stormy in the Umbral version, whereas it's not in the... No, I think it was the opposite way around. We got rain and storm in the living world, and then when you transition into Umbral, there is no rain, because one of the things is that Umbral doesn't have water or flame, which is interesting, right? So sometimes it will actually allow you to progress differently based on that too. It's really clever how they did that. I really enjoyed that. And I also really enjoyed the OST. It's pretty typical for people to say, "Oh man, this boss theme is amazing." We've said that about many other Souls games, and here, that's the case again. I have several boss fights that I remember mostly for the theme songs. For example, there's a cleric lady boss that I struggled with quite a bit. People can check out my VODs on Twitch, but it has an amazing score to it. And I just loved doing that fight, learning the fight, downloading the boss's moves into my head, and just enjoying the epic score to it. Absolutely loved it. And some of the bosses have really memorable designs too. Stuff that really stuck with me, even, after many hours having played the first boss of the game. I really like the design with the wings. It's reminiscent of a League of Legends character. And in any event, it just comes so well into execution. The art design and the execution of the moves. They have a good variety of moves too. I thought, they kind of nailed that part. Not all bosses are memorable like that, but quite a few are. And that's already a really good result for a Souls game. When it comes to the voice acting, this is a bit hit or miss. Some characters have great voicings, and others just kind of phoned it in. And this is not a slight on the actors. I just didn't feel a lot of energy from some of these NPCs, which maybe is intended. But as a result, only a few of them really stuck with me in a significant way. But that's okay. Again, in these games, this is not the main thing that I'm looking for. And in fact, the lore continues to be obscure in this, like it is in Souls. I didn't really catch much of the lore naturally by playing. I kind of came across it from other videos or my friend telling me about it. You know, it's kind of hard to grasp what is actually happening, what are the impacts of your actions and your decisions, really. I do think this is a problem for me personally with these types of games. I would like a more direct type of storytelling. And I understand I'm in the minority here. I know a lot of people love the obscure storytelling where, you know, you have to read every item description and stuff. But in this game, you can't even read item descriptions if you don't have particular stats. That's right. You have to level Radiance and Inferno stats to even be able to read item descriptions. And you need a lot of levels sometimes to actually see. So I don't like tying lore to stats. I think it's kind of dumb. What if I'm running a strength build? I don't want to level Inferno, but I want to dig into the lore. What do I have to do a different playthrough for that? I don't approve of that. You know, I think it's a questionable decision. But let's put that to the side. The game does have multiple endings, which are pretty cool and definitely could motivate a second playthrough. The game does offer a new game plus zero option. So instead of having enemies scale up and be more powerful, you can play the game through at the same difficulty, but with all the gear that you got from completing it the first time. So if you wanted to jump in, quickly zoom through the game and get a different ending, you can do that really easily, which I think is a really nice addition to everything. So let's talk about some of the technical issues that I had. In about 60 hours of gameplay, I got like 10 crashes to desktop, which was annoying, but didn't really cause me too much of an inconvenience. Not to excuse it, I do find it unacceptable to have crashes, for the record, but that's more or less what I got in terms of major issues. The other minor problems I had were enemies disappearing on a pretty rare basis. An enemy would kind of just glitch out and disappear. I don't know if that's linked to the Umbral world transition causing problems there. We also had some camera hiccups. That's pretty typical in these games, right? The camera is your worst enemy sometimes. And so is platforming. Again, the collision and the jumping didn't always work. So visually, it might seem like I landed on the platform, but I didn't. And instead, I slide off and kind of fall down, die horribly, right? So some of those problems, and also some clumsy NPC being killed situations. So without going into detail, just by randomly going up an elevator, an NPC died, right? And that's not okay. You know, you need to, in a game where you can kill NPCs, and that's part of a plot quest even, you need to be careful with NPCs not dying accidentally like that or unintentionally. You have to make sure that the player intended to do that. So that's a problem they need to patch up. There's another kind of clumsiness with charged attacks. Like I told you guys, I used charged attacks quite a lot. And to initiate a charged attack, you can't be sprinting. Now, this is kind of a problem when you're trying to run in and initiate a charged attack. You can't quite do this seamlessly. You need to run in, stop moving for a second, and then initiate. And this is actually enough time for the enemy to retaliate sometimes. It would have been nice to have an option to kind of run in and just get the charged attack started without having to do that little stopgap. Last thing there is that multiplayer has lots of problems. So the teleporting around, people with bad connections causing problems, netcode not being stable, having to reload back to menu and then back in. Lots of problems like that. So I would say multiplayer needs a lot of patching. Needs a lot of patching. Okay, so let's wrap up this enchilada. Fun factor, what's this experience like? What is it like to play this game? What's the level of enjoyment that I got from it? So overall, this was a really fun game to play. And for me, a very worthwhile experience. I very much enjoyed my 60 hours or so that I spent in it. And I highly recommend it if you like Souls games. If you don't, there's no way this is going to change your mind because it's very, very derivative or inspired by whatever you want to say, those games, right? Mechanics, gameplay, all of that, it harkens back to those games way too much for the game to change your mind about them. But if you already like that style of game, this has a lot to offer. Particularly the exploration is the highlight here, and the enjoyable epic boss moments like we talked about, right? It has a lot of stuff to offer. It's streamlined many systems like the ranged and the stance changes, which are huge boons to this game. It has some downsides like some of the clunkiness that we discussed on the technical aspects. Some of the move sets are quite repetitive. So for great swords, for example, they kind of all move in the same way, or hammers all have the same type of move set. I would have enjoyed some more variety in the move sets for different weapons personally. And I have to say, they spam enemies a lot sometimes. There are some areas that have just tons of elite enemies with huge, ridiculous HP pools. So it takes you a long time to progress just because of how many, just the sheer number of enemies thrown at you. Sometimes mobs, sometimes elites. You know, as you get close to the end of the game, that area is just packed and bursting with elites, and it becomes such a slog to get through. I particularly didn't enjoy that area. And I think for me, the enjoyment is mostly on the 1v1 or 1v2 type scenario. I don't really enjoy having to face, 3, 4, 5 elites in like a short segment of a level. That's me, but that did detract from my enjoyment a little bit. And I also struggled with the frustration of not knowing where to go next. And this happened 2 or 3 times after a major level. I just wouldn't know where to go next. And I would have to kind of go back to different levels and see what I missed. Did I miss an entry here? What happened? At different points, I had to ask a friend who was further ahead, like, where do I go now? I do think the game doesn't provide you a lot of guidance. It gives you these maps that honestly are just rubbish, right? There's almost no information in those maps. And I would love to see a little bit more guidance in terms of what do we do next, right? Where are we in the overarching story? That type of thing. If you want to see me play this and other games live, check out my Twitch, link down below. I'm live there every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So I'll see you over there, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.